I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth and the lies told. Today, I'm joined by D.E. Foster. He is the founder and executive director of the online support community Uneven Live, host of the Benzo Free and Uneven podcast, as well as an author of the book Benzo Free: The World of Anti-Anxiety Drugs and the Reality of Withdrawal. Over the past decade, he has aided over 1,000 individuals through the complications associated with chronic anxiety and benzo withdrawal. Theo struggled with anxiety much of his life. He took Klonopin for 12 years as prescribed by his physician, tapered for 18 months, and has been benzo-free since 2014. He has healed significantly from his ordeal, but still deals with the lingering effects of BIND. Through Uneven Life, he supports individuals who struggle with anxiety and the complications of anxiety medication via his podcasts, online community, and daily live Zoom sessions. So thank you so much for coming on because as I told you before we got started that these are the types of stories that I really love to hear because it's such a most people could read that and be like, how did he not hit rock bottom? Or he probably did
hmm
hit rock bottom, but how do you ever get out of it? And it's always like a thing of these are the types of inspirational stories that people love to hear. So I appreciate you for coming on and wanting to share your story.
Well, thank you, Noah. It's really a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me.
So if you could please introduce yourself and just share with my listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think you did pretty good on the intro. I'm D.E. Foster. I just go by D. It's a nickname my nephews gave me years ago and it stuck. So now I just go with D and it works pretty well. Like you said, I was experienced dependence, actually what we call physical dependence to benzodiazepines. And I back in was prescribed those back in 2002. By my primary care physician for stomach distress, actually not even for anxiety. Took it without thinking about it for 12 years. When I learned I was dependent and what the complications were, I tapered off it slowly, but I'm now 11 years benzo free, but I still have neurological complications from it. But with that, like you mentioned, I wrote a book, hosted two podcasts. I started working in research. I've been a medical researcher now for about 6 years and have about 10 different letters and published papers, studies that I've co-authored, and also helped found different organizations within the benzo community. So I've just been really active doing things. It was kind of my way of, I don't know, honestly, just doing something with what happened to me. I think in the end, I kept trying to rationalize, but I needed to make this experience mean something. Otherwise, it's just pain and suffering, and that wasn't going to work for me. So, so that's what I did. So I've been doing that, and now I run a community called Uneven Life. It's at unevenlife.com, and there we help people with anxiety and those struggling with anxiety medications such as benzodiazepines. So things like Xanax, Ativan, Valium, Klonopin, those types of medications. So those are the primary two things we work with.
So was there like a moment when you were taking these this medicine that you realized that you had like kind of a problem or an addiction towards it?
That's a great question. And one thing I want to mention is like there's a difference between physical dependence and addiction. So most of us that I work with don't deal with addiction, substance use disorder. We don't deal with it that much. It's actually more just the physical dependence. We can go into that later. There really is a difference. But there was definitely a time I went to when I relocated and started working in the city because I was teaching down at a college down in Denver, and I went to a new primary care physician. And when I first saw her, she saw I was on Klonopin, and she prescribed me Prozac. I had no idea why I needed Prozac, and she said that's so you can come off of the Klonopin. Again, not realizing I needed to come off the Klonopin. I've been out 12 years, didn't really think about it. And then I went home and I looked it up. And when I saw the horror stories, as so many people in our community do, I pretty much freaked out, panic attack. I had all kinds of problems. I had symptoms of tolerance and dependence. I just didn't really know what they were. So I never put two and two together. So anyway, that was the start of it. So I kept looking for doctor help. I did all kinds of things. I researched online. I learned everything I could about what was going on. And then eventually I tapered and came off the drug. But that was how it happened, was actually a doctor prescribing me an SSRI to supposedly help me come off the benzodiazepine. And I quickly learned about it. And then I kind of saw what had happened.
In the beginning, when you first started taking the for the Klonopin, you say you got back in 2002. What was the reason for you to be put on the Klonopin in the first place? What happened before that?
Yeah, I mean, I've dealt with anxiety off and on my whole life, so it's not something I was new to, but I've never been diagnosed with any disorder. I never had an anxiety disorder of any kind, but I have had chronic stomach problems since I was a child, since 6 months old. So it's one of those things where I've been in and out, all tried all kinds of medication, tried all kinds of things for stomach. And this had happened with my physician in 2002, the same thing. And my understanding is he assumed that a anti-anxiety drug would help me with the stomach. And there's some logic there because stomach discomfort can often be anxiety driven, can be anxiety provoked. So there is a definite tie there to the vagus nerve and everything. So I understand why he did that, but unfortunately, there was no warning, no caution, no nothing that there could ever be any complications, and that was the thinking at the time. That has thankfully changed now over the years to some degree. We're still working on that a lot, but that has changed. But it was just, you know, it was a struggle, and I was having the stomach problems. I think it helped me a little bit, and that's one of the problems with this class of drugs is that they work. Because if they didn't work, nobody would prescribe them or take them. But they do have an initial effect, and they do seem to calm people. The problem is, as soon as they start working, they also start changing your physiology, and that's where we get into the issues. So
After you had got off the Klonopin and were kind of in that spree, did you have to go to a rehab center? Did you have really bad withdrawals from it?
that's a good question. Some people have. We the groups I work with and within we call it what the Benzo community, our group of grassroots people, organizations, nonprofits, group companies like myself that have been doing this for some time. We all kind of have been through it enough that we advise people on what's going on. And one of the things we realized right away is that unfortunately a lot of people that went to rehab for benzodiazepines, it was not very effective. In fact, it often would really mess them up. Now, I'm not against rehab. I'm not about to say that. I think in general, I think it's helpful to people, especially dealing with substance use disorder. Okay. The problem is that with benzodiazepines, there is also this physical dependence part. And that part is very difficult and takes a long time. And most rehab facilities, they don't they can't help you too much because it's too quick. They often want you in and out in 30 days. Okay, and benzodiazepine withdrawal can take months or years, okay, to really come off the drug. It's a very slow process. Also, it's all focused on addiction terminology and addiction treatment types of things, which isn't as effective with physical dependence. And that's one of the things we keep running into. And one of the things I always want to emphasize because there are two worlds. There's this SUD world, substance use disorder, and this other physical dependence. Now, you can have both, absolutely. People can be dependent, physically dependent on a drug like benzos, and also have addiction to the drug. But most people with benzodiazepines, especially benzodiazepines alone that haven't taken other meds, for most of those people, It's usually physical dependence, and it's completely different. They don't get the craving. They don't have the compulsions. Okay, that doesn't come with physical dependence. It's actually the body's adapted to the drug, and coming off the drug can cause severe ramifications if not handled properly. And so rehab, one of the things I'm starting to work with and I'm trying to work with is helping to help educate rehab facilities and treatment facilities so we can better handle benzodiazepines. I think most of them know about the addiction on benzos, but a lot of them don't know, aren't well enough educated on how to handle the physical dependence side. But we're changing that. We're changing that with a lot of work we've been doing lately. So,
So for the benzodiazepines like Xanax, Ativan,
mhm.
Klonopin, and Valium, how dangerous can they be?
They can be really dangerous, but they also are very beneficial in certain circumstances. Okay, and I want to make that clear is that benzodiazepines. And this affected my life in a very negative way, and I've been dealing with it for years. So I would have a good reason to hate these drugs, but I definitely don't want them banned, and most of us don't want them. We realize there are uses for benzodiazepines that are very important. The problem is the overprescribing of them, and the problem is the long-term use. And so that's where we get into the issues around benzodiazepines and where we get to dealing with them. So there are good effects of benzodiazepines, and most people who just take them once, like once a month or once a week, rarely are probably going to have physical dependence. But after 2 to 4 weeks of continuous use, we usually see that physical dependence might kick in. And that could mean for those people a very difficult time coming off the drug, especially if it's not managed well. And that can be, it's really hard to explain to people how severe this is. That's the real, I like your podcast. I listen to the podcast coming in, and what I like is you're okay with us getting down to the guts and the reality and the shit. See, I get to swear here, the shit that we go through. And all I can say is I've lost people along the way. I've lost more than a few people along the way because it's so difficult they can't handle it. And that's been really hard. And so it's a severe problem for people, and most people don't realize how hard it is and the duration because it can last years for some people. Now, good news is not everybody that's on these drugs goes through this. Okay. We're estimating about 30% of the people who take the drugs long term will have complications coming off them. And tapering off the drug slowly also helps. Okay, so if you manage it well, you can alleviate some of the complications. That's what I do. But um, yeah, and I don't know. I'm kind of rambling there a little bit, but it's easy to get into those old talking points that I fall back on. Sorry about that, Noah.
No worries. I think it's such a serious topic
Yeah.
for people to understand. And, a lot of people don't understand what people that go through the detoxing go through, and when
Hmm.
they're trying to get off a pill, they don't know.
Yeah.
Um, what does withdrawal look like when you're trying to get off from anxiety medication?
Yeah, I'm happy to help with that. I actually have something. You asked that. Can I share something with you? Just verbally here.
Yeah.
I wrote a preface on my book, and it's about 3 or 4 paragraphs, but it kind of was my goal of trying to help people understand what this is like because the problem is a lot of the medical professionals have no idea. Still, we're trying to educate them, but they don't believe they didn't know about the medical dependence. The evidence now shows it, and studies are now confirming it, but it was a difficult process. And one of the biggest complications people like myself go through is that we have no place to go to for help. There's very few places, and so we turn online. And most of us, that's what this community is. We had to go to other people who've gone through this to try to find help because our doctors either dismissed us or even, didn't feel like it. So I don't know is it okay with you if I just read this one section from my book?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
It's only take about a minute or two, but I just want to talk because I think it might help. It's a car analogy I've come up with, and I've used it in several different speeches. I've presented it to doctors in continuing medical education and stuff, and I'm hoping it might help explain what this is like. So this is an imagination exercise, just so you know. Imagine you had a car accident, a bad one, a really bad one. Your Prius took on a Mack truck hauling steel piping and lost. Blood is everywhere. Lacerations cover your arms, legs, and face. Bruises blend with burns, leaving little unadulterated skin. Your muscles are twisted and torn. A severe concussion has left you in a fog, barely aware of your surroundings. Paramedics struggle to keep you conscious, but your mind slips into delirium. You are terrified. You don't know what happened, why this happened, or even who you are. You will survive, most likely, but your recovery will be grueling and painful at times and may take months, even years. You may lose your home, your job, your family. You realize that the life you once knew is now gone and you'll never be the same person again. Now imagine that same pain, that same fear, that same suffering, but no one else can see it. There was no car accident. No paramedics are rushing to your aid. It all happened inside of you. When you seek medical help for your injuries, you're met with annoyance, disdain, and disbelief. You attempt to relate your suffering to your friends, family, and colleagues, but nobody understands. How could they? How would anybody believe this hodgepodge of bizarre, invisible, unrelated symptoms that you claim are making your life unbearable? Who would believe in that? And even if people believed you, they'd never accept the outlandish premise that the damage wasn't caused by some massive semi-tractor trailer truck, but instead by one tiny little pill. A pill that your doctor ironically prescribed to help you feel better. Welcome to Benzo Withdrawal and Bind. And that's what I wrote in the book. And it was my way of trying to relay to people because the biggest disconnect we have in our community is very few people understand the severity and the duration of this condition. And it's really hard for us to get that message across to somebody who hasn't been through it. So that's what that was for. Hopefully that was semi-effective. I don't know, but
You use really good descriptive words, and I
thanks.
have learned that when you're, especially in writing, that if you use very descriptive words, it has a very good impact on them
Yeah,
and potentially would help get the point across very well. You could have used generic words, but you used some very good
thanks.
describing words and kind of good imagery. When I read, I like to kind of imagine what I'm reading.
Mhm.
And when you were saying that, I could kind of imagine what you were saying in my head.
Yeah.
And I think that's good, really good. And
And that's the purpose is just trying to get it into somebody else's mind so they can start to have a little. I mean, I think it's the truth for anybody. And I'm not trying to say that we're all some exceptional group. I know people who struggle with cancer and trauma and, the list goes on and on and on and on, addiction and everything. And I think everybody wants somebody else to understand what you've been through and how difficult something is. And we all have had our burdens, and I totally understand that. I think because this one was so disbelieved by most people, including the medical establishment, that is this whole other layer of pain and suffering on top of the actual physical pain and suffering that most people go through. It's really hard for them to find help. And that's why these communities have grown and it's become this massive grassroots community the Benzo community has, and it's become quite successful. We've made a lot of progress within the medical community. So, you know, it just kind of shows that you can make a difference even if, I have a bachelor's degree. I have no master's or doctorates, and yet I'm a co-author of 7 research papers now. So, you can make a difference and change things if you really try to.
you actually made a good point there that you said that you had zero medical background at all. So how did someone like yourself that had zero medical background and had no knowledge about it become a medical researcher?
It's a really good question, though. I still kind of wonder that myself. Um, I started with the book. Really, when my experience happened, I just read everything I could. I wanted to see as much information because I just wanted to figure out how to fix myself, how to get through this, how to survive this experience. I had over 1,000 articles and things, notated and everything. So I decided I wrote a book about it. The book became a podcast. And then I was a co-founder of the Benzodiazepine Action Work Group. And I started working with different organizations there. And I kept kind of going up. Well, while I was doing that, one of my colleagues had created a survey, a benzo survey, and they had gotten that out in 2018, 2019. And so that survey was up, and now they had the data. And like so many of us in the community, the guy that was doing the data work for them had to pull out because he was going through recovery, just like us, and we don't always call it recovery, but healing, however you want to call what we're going through. And so they knew I had data experience, which my former occupation was database programmer. And so I stepped in to do the data work. That's how I got in initially was they invited me in to do the statistics. They knew I knew benzos. They knew I had written on them, and I happened to have some statistical and database background. So I came in, started doing the data work for them. And there's no pay, of course, for these kinds of things. But I said, well, if I can be an author on the paper, I would like it. So I started helping write the paper. And we wrote 3 papers on that survey. The third paper was called the bind paper, aka the bind paper. And it's one where we introduced the term benzodiazepine-induced neurological dysfunction, BIND. And that came out, and that has become a more widely accepted term for this long-term, complicated healing process that we're going through. And so I was really blessed that I was, part of it was luck, and part of it was having the right skills at the right time that somebody needed, and honestly, I just worked really hard on it. I knew it was something I wanted to be part of. And since then, I'm still part of that same research team, and we've just had a study come out 2.5 weeks ago, a new study on benzodiazepines. So we're still researching and we're still producing studies on these to try to help understand the situation better. So, and it makes a difference. And one of the reasons I really focus on research, and it's something to help other people understand, is one of the biggest hurdles, as I mentioned before, was doctors don't seem either didn't believe or didn't know enough to understand about this complication of these meds. And we decided, or I decided a long time ago for myself, that the best way to do is to help educate them. Instead of fighting against them, let's work with them. Well, what do doctors pay most attention to? Studies. They pay most attention to research. So I got involved in research in part because I knew that was a way for us to change the medical establishment, and we did. And it's really amazing. We made a difference. And I was just part of the American Society of Addiction Medicine, just came out with their clinical guidelines on benzodiazepine tapering. That came out earlier this year. And I was one of the panelists that helped create that. So I was blessed to be part of that whole thing. And that is the first clinical guideline that recognizes this condition. So it's pretty amazing. We're making those inroads in the medical community.
Some people have said that benzo withdrawal is worse than heroin. In your
Yeah.
experience, have you seen that as valid, or do you, or is heroin still a little bit more kind of
Yeah.
worse than
It's
benzo?
it's a quote we pass around, I'll admit, and I would say definitely valid. But let me explain myself, okay? To understand that better, because that quote is not it's not fair because here's the problem. Heroin, I know coming off of it, I don't know directly. I've not been through it, but I know people who have. And it's horrendous coming off of heroin. The big difference is usually for short term. Okay. It's that withdrawal period, but it's usually a week or two. You're going through huge things, maybe up to 30 days, but that withdrawal ends and you heal and you move forward. You still might have the substance use disorder. You still might have the cravings, but you've come out of that. Benzo withdrawal can last months or years. And that's really, I think, the differentiator is that for some people, this lasts a really long time. And I could list the symptoms, but we have over 100 symptoms marked that are related to benzo withdrawal. Everything from cognitive dysfunction to severe anxiety, memory loss, dysphagia, inflammation, distension, muscle pulls, you name it. Severe digestive issues. Akathisia is a big one. That's like having restless leg syndrome, but for your whole body, where your whole body just has energy and wants to constantly move. That's one I deal with. Heart palpitations, ab pain, I mentioned akathisia, panic attacks. The list goes on and on. And we've categorized these into 12 different or 14 different categories. But it's a lot of symptoms and it can last a long time. And I think that's might be the reason why of that saying is that and that was came from a doctor, I believe, who originally saw that. So I'm not trying to compare myself because I know heroin has its own issues and that addiction and those cravings and going through the initial withdrawal is horrendous. And the last thing I want to do is try to say that that's not, it's not a comparison. It's just completely different. Okay. And the duration is what makes it so hard.
Sometimes the downside with these drugs, one of the huge risks that a lot of
Mhm.
medical professionals have is suicide
Yeah.
ideation and suicidal thoughts. Um, is suicide a huge risk and a huge factor when it comes to these drugs? And have you personally had an experience with this?
Yeah, that one, I'll try to get through this. Yes, I have. I've lost people along the way. And I've lost people I didn't even know I've lost because the problem is I was providing support through a podcast. And so somebody was corresponding me or whatever, and they stopped. I don't know if they stopped because they got better or if they stopped because they're no longer here. So I didn't always know. Now, some I actually know of, including one person which I can speak about publicly because her story is public. It was covered in the New York Times, but it's Dr. Christy Huff. And she was a close friend and colleague. And we lost her to suicide 2 months ago. I mean 2 years ago, about 2 years ago, I think. Um, maybe a little longer. Anyway, again, if you look at her story or ever see it on there, she actually her statement left by the family was that this was benzodiazepine caused. And that's her statement because she had recovered from Xanax for the most part, but then she had complications going on. Now, I want to be very careful as I say this because this is a factor with some people in the community. But I also want to be very careful not to scare people who find themselves on these drugs and suddenly think they're problems. And I want to say a couple of things. One is um, this may not be you, only probably 30% or so people have protracted. And even of those protracted people, the vast majority of us get through it. It's a very small percentage of people that wind up in that. Unfortunately, it is a factor. It is something we deal with daily. And so I do need to make sure people understand that. So if somebody is going through this, take it seriously. Okay, because there is suicidality that is tied with this experience for many people. We did a survey. In that survey that we reported on, I think if I recall the number right, the people that took the survey, these are people that were experiencing benzodiazepine withdrawal complications. Over 50% said they had suicidal thoughts or suicidality. So it's a large number. Now, most of them never acted on, never actually did anything or attempted but the thought and patterns were there. It's very common in this community, unfortunately.
What's some methods that you've seen and have tried that have helped mitigate and help kind of
Sure.
lower those rates of suicide or even the suicidal
Yeah.
thoughts?
Anything we can do to reduce the symptomatology and reduce just the severity of what people go through helps. Honestly, the number one thing that I've seen that helps is support. Um, Coming off these drugs, it's a physical dependence, and with these GABA A receptors, it's all kind of technical. We can talk about it if you want to, but there are neurological changes, okay, neurological adaptation and or neurotoxicity that has affected the body. And so there's physical symptoms and psychological symptoms, memory loss, and physical things that come out of this. But then there's the overall effect on our psyche, the overall effect on our mind, the overall effect on our mood, and just getting through it. And that's where I spend a lot of time working. There's not a lot I can do to really get rid of their symptoms, but I can help them find a way through mentally. And that's what we focus on a lot at our community is helping them get through this, being around other people that are going through it so they have that companionship and it's amazing how much it helps for somebody to talk about what they're going through with somebody else who's also going through it. And that's almost, it's that I find is probably one of the best things. But honestly, the biggest thing, and this is one thing I really want to emphasize, is a slow taper. Okay, it's coming off the drug slowly is the best thing. Please do not cold turkey off these meds. That can be very dangerous. Okay, it can be lethal in some circumstances. So do not cold turkey if you're taking a benzodiazepine. Go to your doctor, work with your doctor, get support online with one of our groups out here that do this kind of thing, learn about it, and find out how to process a slower taper to come off the drug slowly, if you so choose. You know, so I just want to make sure that's clear. It's something I always got to emphasize, but so that is those are some big things. I think the mental thing and having people to work with and help you through this process, and then even more so the slow taper. Just slowly come off the drug, find your way to get off the drug, and you could do it over time, and that helps a lot.
What what can other support communities learn from the grassroots success
Yeah.
of the benzo community?
That's a great question. Thank you, Noah. I think a lot. I really do. And I want to give a lot of kudos to all the people that were there when I came on the scene because, I've helped out since I've been there, but there are amazing people in our community that have done so much work. I think because we were somewhat ostracized by the medical community, we were left to our own regard. And there's a former doctor, she passed away years ago, but Dr. Heather Ashton, and she wrote a guide called the Ashton Manual. If anybody Googles it, you can find it. And it was like the one medical guide we had to go by because there wasn't much out there. And when I did mine, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, it wasn't much out there. So we went to that, and I think that was a big help having that kind of information there, to have a guide to get through it. And God, I've already forgotten your question, Noah. And actually, one of those things that I do sometimes. One of those symptoms actually is short-term memory loss, and I still have that. So could you repeat what you were asking me, and I can find my way back to it? And I do this all the time, just so you know. When I have those brain things, I just tell you, and people usually work with me, and I go on. But I have some cognitive dysfunction that carries over in memory loss. So if you could remind me of the question, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. The question was, what is it that other support communities can learn from the grassroots
Thank you.
success of the
It's a great
benzo
question.
community?
I'm sorry I lost it. I think that the number one thing people can learn is you can make a difference. Anybody can make a difference. I think that's the number one thing is that, we came into a world where most doctors either didn't believe this was really something or didn't know how to help us. And so what did our community do? We have groups like the Alliance for Benzodiazepine Best Practices who helps our research group. Benzodiazepine Information Coalition. These groups out there, nonprofits, and my group, Uneven Life, but especially those ones, they've been doing research. They work with the FDA. They're out there educating patients, educating doctors. There's a lot of work going on. And I think it's that you can make a difference. And we're actually now making a difference in the medical establishment. And we're helping them understand how better to deal with patients like myself and other ones that are coming along. And also how not to prescribe these so often, overprescribe them to patients so they wind up in the same position. Um, and I think other places that other causes that are having the same kind of issue can follow that lead and realize, hey, if you start working with these establishments and you start doing some research and other stuff, you can actually make a difference that is long lasting, that changes how things are done. The fact that we have this ASAM guideline out there now for deprescribing that recognizes this long-term condition. I never thought would be possible in the time we've done it, but we did it and we're making a difference. So I do think there's a model there that people could follow.
Since you've been clean for so long, have you ever had those urges of wanting to take the of Klonopin again since you've been clean?
It's a really good note. Thank you. Another good question. First of all, I don't typically use the word clean, just so you know. And again, that's more of substance use disorder terminology. Nothing wrong with it. It's just a different concept. For myself, it's like we just consider ourselves free of the medication or whatever. We don't usually say clean, just so you know. You're totally fine. I'm just saying, just making so people understand. Um, as far as craving, most of us, including myself, never had a craving. So that's where that difference is between addiction and physical dependence comes. Addiction more has often the compulsive types of emotions, to take the drug and sometimes there's even some, extreme behaviors because there's so much a desire. The thing that's preventing most people with benzodiazepines, if it's physical dependence coming off them, is that it's just really painful. We have these symptoms sometimes when we start to taper or when we're off the drug, and that makes it really hard. So there's a difference there. So as far as coming off the drug and dealing with all that, it's just one of those things where you have to realize, it's not, again, it's hard to explain, but it's not a craving and it's not an urge. It's just that unfortunately coming off these drugs, we're facing severe physical and psychological symptoms. So it's a painful experience for some people, not for everybody, but for some of us, it's a very painful experience. And that's really what's driving us, not so much a compulsion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me because, some people might not know the difference between that.
I think
I
most people
do,
don't. Yeah.
so I do appreciate you for sharing that.
Hmm.
For people, if someone's listening there now, and well, before I get into that, you did had mentioned earlier that you started a support group online called Uneven Life. Tell me a little bit more about how this support group kind of originated and how the group's doing today.
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks for asking that. Yeah, so I started with the book and then I had these podcasts and the Benzo Free podcast has been going on for 6 years now, over 6 years. So I've been doing that. But and I did research and help create organizations and help people on the way. But the truth is I never created anything formally like coaching, or I was doing coaching through the podcast and I was doing that kind of stuff. But I knew I always wanted to create some place that people could gather, that people could come together. And so October 1st, so almost 1 year ago, today, I launched a community, an online community called Uneven Life. And it's actually an online, it's a private, like social boards, kind of like a Facebook thing, but it's private. It's not part of Facebook. So we have privacy of data and everything like that in this place. And then we also run these live sessions every week. So we run about 7 or 8, even 9 sessions a week, where people can just come and join with other people. And we talk through different things. Each one has different themes. Some have like anxiety, some are focused on benzos, some are focused on different things. And it's all about the community and it's all about people helping one another. And we've had over 125,000 interactions or reactions to our boards since we launched 1 year ago. So the boards have been busy. The group is now growing. We're starting to grow faster, but I tell you, those groups have really been amazing. I ran one just this morning. Monday mornings are easing anxiety groups, so it's focused on anxiety, and we talked about depression and anxiety. And I mean, there's tears and people just dealing with what they're going through and helping each other out and giving advice and talking through things. And that's what our groups are about. So that group evolved. I kicked that off. We now launched coaching 2 months ago or a month ago. And so we have coaching also, and we'll be adding some courses. So those are kind of the areas that, along with the content that we have on our website, which I've been growing now for 6 or 7 years. So we're basically an overall resource for information on anxiety and anxiety medication.
So how are you doing today, um, with everything that you've been you've recovered for
Yeah.
since 2014? How are you feeling today?
I'm doing really well today. I can't say I don't have neurological complications still, I do. But I would say probably the ballpark is I've healed 85%, which is pretty amazing. Now, I am one thing I want to let people know, I'm one of the very rare cases who this far out at 11 years still has complications. Okay. This is very odd. There's a few of us out there. There's some other professionals that I work in the community who have been some of my mentors that I work with who have been even longer. But it's very rare. Most people heal long before that. Most people heal within the first few months or year or whatever. But I'm very optimistic. I am very pleased with the progress I made, and I've learned to adapt a lot, and I think that's a big part of it. I learned how to adapt to some limitations I have in my life. I still carry some symptoms with me, but my attitude is different, and I just love doing what I do. I love helping out people who are just really going through a hard time. Really going through a hard time, and a perfect example is my friend I mentioned who we lost. Dr. Christy Huff, and I just want to mention that because she was my colleague. She was former medical director at Benzodiazepine Information Coalition, and last person I thought that would have a problem or a complication, and then she had a setback and things got worse. And that was as I was going through some complications. So it was also mirroring a lot of what I was going through that when she was struggling. And it really makes it hard, but you have to sometimes go past that and start to find things to cling to, things that are positive, things to help keep you moving forward. I think meaning in life is everything. You got to have, why are you still going forward? What's your purpose? And I don't know, part of me thought maybe there's something divine, maybe there's something behind that. Maybe there's a reason why I'm one of those very small minority people who still gets complications because that keeps me more in touch with the people I support. You know, I mean, it's one thing I think to say, yeah, I went through that 7 years ago. It's another thing to say, yeah, I had that yesterday. And I know the fact that I still have lingering symptoms makes me more relatable to the people I support. So if that's the reason, I don't want to say I'm okay with it, but um, I get it. And maybe that's why I still have complications. I don't know. I don't really know. But I am a minority, and I want to make sure people realize most people heal long before I have. I'm just one of those odd ones out.
You did mention kind of a little bit ago that one of the things that you suffered from was a little bit of short-term memory loss. What
Yeah.
other symptoms or other repercussions have you faced since your recovery in 2014?
Since the recovery 2014, I've had over 50, 60 symptoms. So it's kind of hard to list them all, but everything from physical symptoms, muscle tears, muscle burning skin, some pins, a lot of paresthesia, which is the poking of the pins, some really severe paresthesia, neuropathy. These are all pretty common. Akathisia, a lot of digestive problems. Many people we go through have what we call benzo belly. It has its own name because it's so common. But everything from abdominal distension to gastric distress to pelvic floor dysfunction to the abdomen does take a big hit through all this. Had heart palpitations, slurred speech, still have some of that. Throat tightening. I had dysphagia, which is throat tightening only a couple of years ago and got medically treated for it. Yeah, again, it's a long, long list of symptoms, and most are ones, the tinnitus. I have three types of tinnitus in my ears, so that's really common. The problem is that these drugs affect our nervous system, both our central and peripheral nervous systems. And when you get dysfunction to your nervous system touches everything in the body. And so the symptoms come out in a whole variety of symptoms. And unfortunately, I think that's one of the reasons people didn't believe us for a long time. Because as I mentioned in that intro, the preface was it's a hodgepodge of symptoms. And people say, well, there's no way these are related. But if you bring it back to the neurological core, they are related, and it all makes sense. In fact, a lot of these symptoms are from the root of the same people who have severe anxiety. A lot of these are similar to people who struggle with very severe anxiety. And it kind of extends from that. But, the best way to explain it, I think it's important, was kind of a car analogy, which is we have glutamate and GABA in our system. There's a lot more neurotransmitters, but just think of these two. And glutamate revs you up, excites you. Okay, it's the one that gets you energized to go do things. And GABA slows you down. It's the calming relaxation chemical. These drugs specifically tie to the receptor of GABA, enhancing its effect, so calming you more when you take them. When you come off the drug, it's the opposite. So for most of us who have this condition, these receptors are downregulated, which means we don't receive that calming message barely. And so we easily get excited in the system. So we easily get revved up, fight or flight. We're in a constant state of fight or flight. And we don't, because we're not receiving that calming message right now. And that takes a long period to heal. And that leads to a lot of different symptoms.
For people that are suffering from this disease or from this troubling drug, what steps can they take today to help maybe start to live a better life
Sure.
and to get to help them get off this uh, kind of help them go through withdrawals if they
Yeah.
have started doing it.
Yeah, I think the first thing is, of course, don't stop cold turkey. Just don't stop taking the med, regardless. That's one thing I want to make sure people understand that. Always talk to your doctor. I am not a medical professional and can't give medical advice. I always want to make sure I say that. Um, but talk to your doctor. Go online, go to our organization, go to these other organizations I'm mentioning here, and get some information, get support. There's a lot of books out there. There's all kinds of information. Learn about what this is. And be careful because if you go online and you read some people's stories, sometimes they're horrific and they sound really bad. But remember, again, that's a small minority of people because your mental state going through this is really important. So it's best to take a step back, realize if you've been taking the drug for a long time, okay, so I might be physically dependent. And this might be a complicated process. Maybe I should go get some help, go get some good information to get through this properly. That is, I think, the best process. And again, we never say anybody should be forced to come off of benzos. That's just my belief system and a lot of people I work with because it's a difficult process. But if you so choose, because there are long-term complications the longer you stay on them, then seek help and get help from people who know what they're doing. It makes a big difference. So, and work with your doctor. Just like I said, never stop taking a benzodiazepine cold turkey.
If people would like to reach out to you and maybe if they would
Mhm.
like to learn more about this and maybe have additional questions for you that didn't get answered today, where can they all find you at? And feel free to promote anything that you have going on to where
Yeah.
people can help support you.
Well, thank you, Noah. I appreciate that. Yeah. So again, my organization is Uneven Life, and I'm the executive director there, along with our managing director, Rachel Mascaro. She's the one that helps run the community with me. And we've done a lot of good work there. So just go to unevenlife.com. That is our website. From there, you can see all our information. You can find connections to our community, to our coaching, and all our information on benzos, our information on anxiety is all on that website. And also, there's also a form on there, an information form. So if you want to reach one of us, you can fill out the form. One of us, either Rachel, myself, or somebody else gets that form. Happy to get back to you if you have questions on things, and we'll try to help you out as best we can.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with me. I think it'll help a lot of people that are struggling with the same thing, or if they know someone that's also going through a hard time with this drug. And
Yeah.
I think it'll help a lot of people. So I do appreciate you for coming on and sharing this with me and being so open about it. It shows a lot of strength.
Well, thank you, Noah, and I appreciate you having me on here so we can spread the word and help people understand this is going on, and there is help out there for people struggling with it.
I will put all of his links in the description box below so that it's all easy access for all my listeners to find. So it's easy. You can also follow me on social media as well. Instagram, TikTok, it's Lethal Venom Podcast. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, it's Noah's Podcast. Feel free to follow those if you'd like to keep up with the podcast on the social media side. And as always, follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. It's on all of the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's basically everywhere you get podcasts. So feel free to subscribe to be notified when new episodes drop. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to today's episode. Hope y'all have a great rest of your day and week, and I will catch you on the next episode of Lethal Venom.